Hi,
Okay.
everyone, and welcome to Gin with Gwynne. I'm Oliver Gwynne, and this is where we talk about marketing, data, and philosophy. This week, we're talking about toxic fans, and in particular, Star Wars. And I'm joined with a big Star Wars fan, Justin. Yeah, would you like to introduce yourself, Justin?
Hi, I'm Justin of Risk-Averse fame. If you've listened to our band, we have almost 250 Spotify listeners, so getting pretty big. Going to be playing in rooms of maybe 20 people now instead of 15.
So, I guess one of my questions to you is: do you think that the toxic fandom exists? And the reason I ask this is quite often when I'm online, I see people now reacting to media clips or for third parties who say fans are outraged at the Acolyte and there's too much diversity and it's too woke. But I see very few people actually making those comments. I only see people reacting to media clips and stuff that say that people have got angry about it. And so my question is, do you think that there is a toxic fandom, or is it something that's sort of being manipulated and created?
I think that there probably is a toxic fandom, but I think that a lot of it can be overblown because I think what's happened, especially in the US, and I just think overall worldwide, is journalism lost all of its way to make money and funding over the last 20 years. So I really think it's a structural issue. Because you took the funding out of journalism, a lot of the ways that stories are generated are they look for trends that are happening on social media, and if there's a few people, they'll pick out these tweets, and it won't necessarily be a representative sample of how everyone's feeling, but because those people are the most loudest and the most online, they'll get stories about them. And because journalists don't have enough time they just need to get stuff out the door. If you need to get a bunch of stories out the door, hey, this is happening on social media, a few people talking about it, let's ship it. There's not really time or funding to do anything deeper than that.
Yeah, so maybe it's not so much that there's a problem with Star Wars per se, it's just that the first article that was about negative Star Wars coverage got so much ground that they were like, hey, this is a gold mine, let's just keep running those stories. And then that's where maybe it's come from.
Yeah, I mean it's like a feedback loop. It's whatever generates either excitement or anger is what people I think react to most on social media, because the metric is engagement, right? So it's whatever people are commenting on it, if people are liking it, if they're clicking it, if they're talking about it, if they're sharing it, that's what matters. It doesn't matter what even the content of the thing is. What matters is whether or not it gets engaged with, because that's what funds the ads dollars, which funds the social media platforms and the media things themselves, which are a weird place because they're kind of content creators, but they're not really for the platform.
Yeah, I think the studios have maybe learned a lesson that they should stop using that as a sounding board, because I think Star Wars in particular, I remember when Solo, a couple of years before Solo came out, there was a popular article about are droid slaves in the Star Wars universe, and it was very popular and it shared a lot. And then you might remember in Solo, they had a whole storyline where a droid had an uprising, and I thought, I wonder if they had put out that article specifically to see that, hey, it's trending, let's put that in the film.
Yeah, I mean, droids are weird in the Star Wars universe, but there's so many things in the Star Wars universe that are just not great. I mean, the fact that they've jettisoned so many things, but then they kept the prequels, which are so much more transparently offensive, with the Trade Federation aliens, or the non-specifically Jar Jar Binks and Watto, the fact that was a whole thing that they kept in there.
Is an interesting thing though. So the prequels weren't that long ago, I
No.
was a young boy, but it doesn't seem so long ago in the relative scheme of life on Earth. But you've got slavery in there, and now people are saying that Star Wars has got too woke. They changed the name of Boba Fett's ship to not be Slave One. Now it's called something else, or it's just called the model of the plane. Do you think that it is becoming more woke, considering that George Lucas had slavery in there only like 20 years ago.
Well, I mean, I think that part of the problem is like, what is Star Wars, right? Star Wars is kind of like the bulkhead of the genre of science fantasy, and fantasy has its own problems with racism that it's kind of contending with right now. Like, like for example, in Dungeons and Dragons, for a while they had, race and class. Like there was an idea in the D&D universe that, and going all the way back to Tolkien, and I think Tolkien said he didn't intend it this way, but I think that he probably was part of, like high modernist, like early 20th century fiction, which was steeped in the racism of the time. Like the idea that you have a specific group of people who have immutable characteristics that define their entire personalities. Like, I mean, I think it would be weirder to be like, yeah, that's just normal. That's how life is.
It's interesting because it doesn't really comment good or bad on slavery or anything. It's mostly used to juxtapose, like Anakin wanted to free the slaves, and then he sort of becomes, the very thing that he hates in the end. He creates this oppressive system that basically makes people into slave, and in some cases, like literally in canon with like Andor, where the prisoners are just basically slaves.
I mean, it makes sense. It's essentially it's like a tale about struggling with mortality and immortality, but like the part where it always rings hollow is you have the good versus evil, and like obviously the Sith are evil, but like also like even when the High Republic was at its best, like it's still like anti-democratic or not something that like the United States would regard as good, or the UK. I mean, it's like it's not too different than the Empire, other than like it's it's a it's an imperial power with a good face versus an imperial power with a evil face.
Yeah. So coming back to this idea of toxic fandom and people just generally being upset, if you're a studio, obviously it's been a long-standing tradition that audiences get test screens, films get changed because of it, series get picked up or not because of audience feedback.
Yeah.
But at the moment, you've got this sort of shroud surrounding things where nobody seems to be happy with anything. There's a lot of bad publicity with the Acolyte. Before it even come out, people were deciding that they didn't like it. They see one trailer with small snippets and they're picking it apart. What do you do as a movie production studio in this environment? How do you handle it? Do you just ignore the fans, or do you go, we're going to go a different way, or how would you handle that?
Yeah, I think that like again, it's part of a problem with like representative samples. If you, by nature of being people who need like to make money by watching movies, the people who are going to be involved in the test screening are going to be different from population of people that are actually going to watch and enjoy the movie. So like I think that you need to have a certain percentage of like, you need to think about like who's going to watch this, and then I think you need to try and make your sample of test watchers or test readers like it needs to be some people who are already in your test audience, and then you also need to include some people who aren't in your test audience at all, who literally know nothing about the thing. When I'm doing creative work, I have specific people that I draw, and I'm like, okay, these people are good. Like they know what I'm going for. They're going to tell me whether or not I'm hitting like the intentional thing I'm trying to do. And then I also try and share with people who don't have any idea of anything of the art form or whatever I'm trying to make, because they will tell you things that people who know too much won't be able to see.
Yeah, because a lot of the criticism has been that, Lucasfilm and Disney, they're making films and properties and they're aiming their audience towards this very niche. They're being very diverse in what they're trying to do. They seem to care more about that than the message, which not something that I agree with, but that's the criticism of them, is that they're putting sort of messaging and optics above story. Obviously, as two white men, we can talk really
Yeah.
well about diversity, but do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think that it is an agenda that's being pushed, or do you think that maybe that's not the case at all and it's just people's perceptions?
I mean, literally, I think that literally they're just, I don't know, casting more people that aren't just like white. That's fine. I think that's fine. I mean, I think that's like, if you want Star Wars to last, you're gonna have to make it be for more people. You're trying to expand the franchise. And I think Star Wars is such a big thing. Like, I think that there's like don't worry. Like, if you don't like this, there's gonna be something else. Like, there's so much Star Wars. There's so much Star Wars. Like, you're never gonna run out of Star Wars. Like, don't worry, you know? And
Sort of understand though with characters like the Little Mermaid, a lot of people said, oh, you know, it's silly, this is a fictional underwater creature, it's not real, why are people getting upset about it? But I can sort of understand that to a degree, because it's like, this is a character that's existed for like 30-40 years, played by the same voice actress for most of that time, had not just one movie but also like loads of straight to DVD, straight to VHS stuff, a full TV series. So it's a character that people knew and loved and had a certain image in their head, and then suddenly it was replaced. And maybe it wasn't so much a race issue. I think it was more like, hey, why are you changing this character that I know and love? What's the reason behind it? And then people question, well, is it because that's the best possible actress for that role? She had an amazing voice, or is it because there's some sort of diversity message that you're trying to push on me? Compared to an Acolyte, which is something completely new, we don't know any of the characters beforehand. To get angry at that doesn't make any sense to me, because it's like, well, you don't know anything. It's not like you've got a preconceived notion of what those characters are. And so I think there might be a difference in my mind where, you know, Scooby-Doo was replaced by a diverse cast in the recent animation, and people got annoyed with that. And I was like, yeah, I can sort of understand, because that's a property that's existed for so long and it just feels like a bit forced, versus here's something new and interesting that's diverse, and then people don't like it because it's diverse. I don't think those people are necessarily complaining about the same thing. I think maybe the people who complain about the Acolyte have a problem.
I think like the way that I always think about it is like as somebody who makes art, like, I would much rather someone make something like bad but interesting than like fine but boring. And I don't think that everyone feels that way. I think that for a lot of people, they like, I saw this happen with Ghostbusters, right? When the Ghostbusters 2016 came out, and I didn't watch that because I'm not a big Ghostbusters person, but I know that people got like, I think that like this Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I mean, it looks bad, like, and so does the 2016 one. They both look kind of bad, but like the 2016 one, at least like they were doing something newish. You know, they brought in a bunch of new people. They're trying to take a different direction with it, even if, you know, it didn't look the best. But just like where it's like, yeah, we're just gonna, like, I don't know. I would rather. I think you have to have to take big swings if you want to make cool things. Because I think Andor was like a big swing. I mean, there's not really like the Force in that at all. It's focused on this like ancillary character.
You know he's going to die.
Yes. Yes. No, exactly. So it's like people don't know what they want. They don't like new things unless it's good, but you can't have something. I don't know. I have no patience for people that want like bland, boring stuff, because that's not what art is about. Like, it should be trying to express yourself on some level. And I think that is like a fact which is always going to be a little unappealing to the business side, because it's not something that's monetizable. It's not monetizable to make a product that includes everyone's or people's specific weird insecurities and fixations. That's not a really like, if you when you make like a Happy Meal, you know, you don't know how the person who like flipped the patty felt. Like, you're not like, oh, like, if that person was happy or sad, or if they're a dog person, or if they're a cat person, or if they're afraid of trains, or they don't know how to swim. You know, that doesn't affect the Happy Meal. But when you're making art, all of that goes into it. like whether you like it or not. And I think that trying to squeeze out that element is you're going to end up with like stuff that's not very good.
I mean, if you were given the franchise today for some reason, George Lucas shows up and he's decided you're the one to take it on, Justin, what do you do? What's your next move?
Oh, what I do is I would want to make a horror movie that's set from the perspective of someone, just a normal person who is in the middle of a battle between the Jedi and the Sith, and grappling with the existential horror, which is never acknowledged in the Star Wars universe, which is how terrifying would it be to just be a normal person when there are people who can jump hundreds of feet into the air and like decapitate you with a laser sword in 1 second. Like the Jedi would be terrifying people, even just to talk to or be in the presence of.
They can read your mind and change your mind for you if you're of weak will, and you won't know about it. Maybe they told you to do something and you've forgotten.
Yeah, I would be dead terrified of them. Like literally, if they were like, if they were here to save me or whatever, like it would be akin to being like, oh yeah, like God's on our planet right now. You're like, oh God, something bad's gonna happen. It'd be like in The Incredibles, like when Mr. Incredible shows up and he's like, I saved the day, and then like the whole town is destroyed. Like that's what the Jedi do.
I think if I had it, I would just do nothing for about 12 years or something. I think you have to build up the anticipation and desire and demand again. You've had too many Star Wars things in such a short amount of time. I think Bob Iger, he came back in and he stopped them releasing like 3 Marvel films every year. He said they're going to scale back on the TV things. And I think that's completely right. I think these things become less special if there's too many of them. And then you get a problem where quality is not always good. You get things like Solo, where I quite like that film, but it was just a bad idea not to have Harrison Ford in there.
Well, I have to say one thing. One other thing I would do. Okay, here's my pitch. It's a buddy cop style show starring Jar Jar and Watto, and they go around Tatooine solving crimes, and it'd be like a fun like Lethal Weapon buddy cop type thing.
Okay, I know you've got a Watto impression in your locker. Do your Watto impression for us.
Okay, so this is Officer Watto. I guess Officer Watto and Lieutenant Jar Jar. Seems like this Mandalorian took a few too many shots to the head, huh? You know? And then the Jar Jar I could do, it's not as good. So, Misa. I can't do it as well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll put that in a video. Okay. Thank you very much, Justin, for your time. Thanks for appearing on the podcast. I think it was really interesting and fun talking to you.
Great talking to you as well.